Esther, thank you for joining us. Everyone, a round of applause, please, to welcome Esther Perel.
Thank you. It's only taken us 3.5 years with a few postponements.
Yeah. Esther and I spoke quite a few years ago. You haven't aged one day, but I have. And
that's because you never saw me.
We had the most amazing conversation all those years ago for Dumbo Feather magazine. Mm-hmm. And today is a lucky second go at talking to this magical human who I know has inspired all of our lives. And so my request to all of you beloveds who are here in this very small, lucky crowd, I count myself among the lucky. Can you turn your phones off? I've got to turn mine off.
You can take a photo first.
Oh, yeah, you can take photos. Just don't let anybody ring during the thing.
And then you will stroke your little collective fetish and put it away.
I have no control over where this is going tonight.
What did you think?
I had an illusion of control. That's what I arrived
That's
with.
what it usually is.
Yeah. An illusion?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to take my jacket off soon. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today with this incredible heritage we are so lucky to be recipients of, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. So we have a lot of amazing people here tonight. There is a heady mix of writers, performers, producers, directors, and quite a lot of practitioners in the therapeutic
No
field.
patients? Now we get the representation.
And actually, one of the first questions, I'm happy you're here.
Me too. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
And thank you all, really. I mean, if you're here, it's because there's already a bit of a... Actually, maybe I ask, how many of you know nothing about me or the work or anything like that? It's totally fine. I just want to know. Yeah, no, they exist. And then there are the skeptics. It's always good to acknowledge the skeptics too.
What are they skeptical about?
Oh,
Connection?
or somebody knowing better than them what they think they should know themselves, or someone who agrees with their partner.
Gold.
That's the variations on skepticism.
So I would love to start there. What do you do when you're in front of a skeptic to disarm them, Esther Perel style?
I can tell you exactly, because I have done it more than once. If somebody comes in, if a couple comes in, I ask, did you both want to be here? And then I can ask, was one of you basically seduced, forced, arm wrestled, whatever, to show up? And then I say, what's it like for you? And then they say, I don't believe in therapy, or something like that. And then I say, I hope you really don't change your mind. This is not about changing your belief system. If it was helpful, you'll tell me, I helped you, or this was helpful, and I'll be great. And then I get up, and then I shake the hand, and I say, I have tremendous respect for the skeptic. Because the one who is here because they believe in it, or they've had it before, or they know it, or that's easy. The question I would like to ask you, the person who wanted to be here, is would you have been as open as your partner to show up in something that you utterly don't believe in? That kind of sets the point. No, it's very true. It's not it's so, ask, instead of trying to convince the other that this is a good thing to do, ask yourself if you would have been amenable to actually follow somebody and show up in something that you really couldn't care less about. And so I highly respect the skeptic, because I actually think that the skeptic is sometimes more open-minded than the person that is supposedly in the role of the open-minded. Did you understand that?
So how do we know? How do we test ourselves? Because the mirror, I'm super open-minded. I work from open mindset. I'm like, bring it on. But how do we actually test the veracity of our own beliefs about ourselves?
It's a lot of different things, but one thing is the ability to be able to hold multiple truths, including the ones that contradict with yours. You know, couples therapy, how many of you have ever experienced couples therapy? Couples therapy is a notorious drop-off center, you know, where people bring somebody to you and just say, we have a problem, it's this person, fix it, and I'll help you. I'll tell you everything I know. I'm an expert on the other. You know, so the first thing about the open-mindedness is actually the ability of people to sit down and say, here is what I do to fuck things up. That takes you a long way, rather than here is everything my partner is doing to fuck things up. That's an old story. That doesn't mean the partner isn't doing things. It just doesn't move the story forward.
I love it, because it's making me think about what my grandmother used to say, which is don't look at what he isn't. Because that's a really long list. And I'm sure his is as long as yours.
That's very well. The second phrase is the more important one. I once had a couples therapist, because I've had my share of them too, you know, good, bad, and ugly. And he said, he just threw a sentence out like that, out of the blue, and he said, couples, there's about 80 things they can disagree about. If they agree on 4, they should consider themselves lucky. You know, this was basically to say to us, shake out of your thing. But I like your grandmother's wisdom as well.
How do you, I mean, I'm cutting ahead. I don't know what to stay with. Do I go to how do you hold that spaciousness in yourself to stay open and generous and available to both perspectives? Because the question I want to get to, which I have no control over, but I'll put it in anyway, is I think that in the world at the moment we're becoming so alarmingly entrenched in our positions. And to stay spacious, I mean, what's harder, staying spacious and generous and available in couples therapy or online or with anyone else who disagrees with our position? How do we stay spacious and generous and generative when the world needs it more than ever? When it's so hard?
I had a conversation with Yuval Harari recently, who wrote *Sapiens*, and we talked for a good 2.5 hours. And at one point I said, you know, I know, so the whole discussion was, of course, that I do the micro and he does the macro. But one of the things was, I've done couples therapy for more than 30 years. And what I can say is that couples therapists have a lot of experience working with polarized systems. You know, and polarized systems of people who once thought they were very united. And those are actually even more polarized. And that you know, the inability of one person to even be able to consider the perspective of another, to see it as an attack on them, to see it as something they have to fend against and defend against, or they're going to just evaporate, you know, right on the spot. All of that. So we learn a lot about cancel culture. We learn a lot about polarization. We learn a lot about how difficult it is to tolerate somebody that is close to you and says things that you disagree with. Research basically says that you can tolerate 10 seconds. That's 3 sentences of somebody saying stuff that you don't agree with before you either start to hyperventilate or to build in your rebuttal and you no longer listen. And if you then do this little exercise that, you know, that couples therapists use so often about reflective listening, it is fantastic to see how hard it is for people to repeat what was just said to them, even if it's one sentence which they cannot endorse. Endorse is a strong word, but tolerate. So
What's an example of reflective listening?
What I just heard you say is that you wonder about how does one stay spacious today in a world where things often are so entrenched. How do you maintain a position of openness when everything wants to actually shut you down? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, you're very
Okay.
good.
Because I didn't disagree with it. Say something I don't like about myself and you'll see if I can repeat it.
Say something you don't like about yourself.
That you don't like about me.
I just can't think.
No. Ask my husband.
You said that you've been to couples therapy with your husband.
Yeah, of course.
Do you just sit there in critical analysis of the other analyst? Has anyone ever surprised you and you've gone, very good?
No, not with that tone. But yes.
Oh, meaning I was being a bit superior?
I can do that too. No, I think I do remember going, no, listen.
My husband's in the audience going, yeah, you can be.
No, when you finally have somebody that you feel gets you, that's a relief. And you just feel like, oof, somebody who gets it, somebody who can hold me, and somebody who I don't, I used to sometimes think, I have these people sometimes who say, you really made a difference, you changed things for me, and why can't I meet somebody who does that for me? Am I so difficult? That was the kind of... And then at some point you meet someone who just basically organizes things the way that is helpful to you, and you say, okay, I finally found someone who I think is ahead of me and can make me feel like I don't have to... I can relax, basically. I can give in to whatever it is that I need to address. And listen, couples therapy is a very recent field. It's a recent profession. I don't know if you know that. It wasn't important until recently because it didn't really matter if the couple got along or not, because once you got together with somebody, you were stuck for life. And that was that. And if you didn't like it, maybe you can always hope for an early death of your partner, preferably. But there was no exit.
Be of your partner.
So there was no exit. So it didn't really matter if the couple did well or not. They didn't get along, you went to talk to somebody else. Today, the survival of the family depends basically exclusively on the happiness of the couple, in the West at least. That has changed everything. So the couple needs to get along or they won't be a family. There's no excommunication. There's no-fault divorce. All of that. So that's how couples therapy emerges. And it is very challenging. It's a very difficult form of therapy. And it is, unfortunately, often useless. I'm sorry to say. Useless because sometimes people come past due date and its shelf life has expired. And sometimes because dyadic systems can really entrench you, this is the thing, in such a place where you can't move it. You just cannot move it. If you are alone, you can, of course, put the responsibility on the world, on society, on your parents. You can find other people to hold accountable. But nothing is as seductive as you think. When I met you, I was happy because of you, and now I am miserable because of you. And the more miserable I am, the more I need you to change. And the less you change, the more resentful I become. And the more resentful I become, and the less likely you are to change. And the less likely you are to change, and the more I depend on you to do the changing, because otherwise I will become even more miserable. And I am caught in this hostile dependence like that for decades. And it's extremely hard to undo.
Yeah, it's an awful moment. It's a hideous moment when you realise that you're just unhappy.
That you're just...
unhappy in yourself, like that you can't pass the blame onto the other person or the other, and you have to take that accountability onto yourself. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's much easier to do this than to do that.
Bravo.
This is the shorter route to change.
Yeah.
But it's extremely difficult to convince people to do that.
So I'm going to do a Yuval Harari. I don't want to put myself in such
That was
a
quite a
strange conversation. You see how I
conversation.
did that? But if we talk about, he talked about the macro and you talk about the micro, but of course they're completely interrelated, because if we have these intractable problems that are becoming increasingly hard to heal, and some people have their finger on the nuclear button, how do we here?
No, it's not just that some people have the finger, it's that the people who have the finger don't have the best judgment.
Yes, and we're becoming so increasingly polarised, even though what we really want is connection.
But seriously, do you really think we are getting more polarized than the 100-year war? I mean, we often have a tendency to think that these things have never been as bad before as they are today. I'm not so sure that that's necessarily the case. People have been polarized, inside the community, between people, between nations. I mean, there have been wars that lasted forever. I'm not sure we are more polarized. I think that we are more aware of it because we hear more voices. You can hear more people and what they think and what they have to say than ever before, because the public square has become global. But the public square has been a ruthless place for a long time in every village, where you could be cut, guillotined, hung, and everything because you believed something else. I mean, I don't know that we are more polarized.
I love it because your perspective is very unique, and I'm not sure that many people here know about because you became incredibly famous for your sex therapy and relational therapy and talking about eroticism. They were all titillating subjects. But prior to that, you had an incredible 20-year career. Just can you tell everybody what you were working on prior to the TED Talk?
So I have been a relationship therapist, a family therapist, a systems-oriented therapist, and basically a cross-cultural therapist. And I have studied relationships in transitions. And the kinds of transitions that I was interested in was either refugees or internationals, basically people who move the most, but for very different reasons. And then I was interested in mixed marriages, racial, cultural, and religious intermarriage all over the place, because those people also are in cultural transition, but it's happening in their own living room. And I basically have studied relationships across cultures. That's the basic thing I've done. And why did I look at it like that and looked at mixed marriages? Because I thought it's an incredible lens for looking at, mixed marriages supposedly are meant to be the opposite of polarization. It's people who come together across religion, across race, across language, across class, in ways that would not have been anticipated or accepted by their community, for that matter. So they are disruptors in today's language. And I thought that there is a lot to learn about, those people, those families, and especially the next generation. What do we create, intergenerationally when we break barriers, and not just barriers, total taboos?
What's the benefit
That's
for us?
That's what you wanted me to say?
Yeah, that's what I wanted, because I think that migration, working with couples in migration, refugees, that you've seen a lot that maybe many of us are not exposed to. So we think these ideas are new.
Yeah. So I speak 9 languages. I think that may add something. And I work in 7. So I kind of can live in New York City and travel the whole day. Besides the fact that I work globally, but there is something about shifting language that literally takes you elsewhere as well. And some of the work I do is multilingual depending on what's in the room. So that helps with a real understanding of what are the cultural intricacies that influence the way we conceptualize relationships, our expectations of relationships, gender roles, hierarchy, intergenerational loyalty, and basically the meaning itself of relationships, the degree to which they are considered central and an organizing principle of our sense of ourselves and our values, and the degree to which relationships are actually seen as secondary to task and to the self and to a pursuit of autonomy and self-reliance. That kind of continuum, I think, is really very telling for how we navigate relationships. Personal, familial, work, friendship, love, all of that. I'm interested in love and intimacy, but I don't just think it applies to romantic relationships. I think that we've lost a little bit of a context here.
I felt that in your amazing podcast. If you haven't heard Esther's latest podcast, well, I don't know if it's your latest because you're prolific, but your podcast on work, it's unbelievable. There is a love and intimacy and so many incredible threads there that are the same as an intimate marriage or relationship. That surprised me.
Yeah, because really everybody goes to work with an official resume called your CV that you put on LinkedIn. And then everybody goes to work with the unofficial resume, which is your relationship history. And that usually doesn't stay at the door. Basically, whenever they say we should bring our whole self to work, I always say we already do.
Mm. I'm hearing a thread here that there's nothing new under the sun, and that maybe we think things are new because of the circumstances that we're in. Because I was just going to ask you, are there new questions and new dynamics coming up post-COVID?
Oh, yes. There's so many new things. There's a lot of new things in the world of... I mean, I tried yesterday at a talk here in Melbourne to do a little bit of a summary of how many things have changed. So, do you want me to? It takes a few minutes, but honestly, friendship hasn't changed so much. Sibling relationship hasn't changed so much, but parent-child has. Mm. And romantic relationship have literally, undergone a major upheaval. But globally, I mean, in the broad thing, I think the most important thing to understand is this. And it's very interesting because I've been in these Uber cars every day with other people from other parts of the world, and it's like I have this one conversation, going across here. In the village, in the tribes that we used to live in, or that many other people in the world still live in, relationships are organized around hierarchy, structures, institutions, religious institutions as they used to be, and roles were very clearly defined. Everybody knew what was their task. Everybody knew whose career mattered and who was going to wake up to feed the baby and who has a right to demand for sex and what the kids should be doing. And all of these things were codified. And that gave us, in the realm of relationship, a lot of clarity and a lot of certainty and just about zero freedom. We have shifted the model. And we have shifted it with the urbanization, with the rise of individualism, a lot of things. And we have shifted duty and obligation for options and choice. And all the big decisions that used to be made for us, we now have to make them ourselves. What do I want to do? Where do I want to live? Is this good enough? Is this too bad to leave but too good to, or too bad to stay but too good to leave? This whole relationship ambivalence. And that gives us a lot of freedom, but we are a lot more alone as well. And we have a lot more uncertainty, and we are often crippled with self-doubt because the burdens of the self have never been heavier. Because if you have to make all of these decisions, and your decisions are no longer guided just by commitments, because now they are guided by your feelings, you need to know that what are the true, authentic feelings that you need to follow. And that means that you have to know with utter precision the answer to all kinds of questions that are rather complicated. And that is a massive shift in the realm of relationships. Couple that with the fact that everything about relationships used to be tight knots, hard to undo, and now they are loose threads, in and out very easily. That's another major difference. And then everything around social life was organized around tradition and stability and continuity. And now it's all about change and disruption and innovation and, speed. And if you want to slow down on occasion, you can go and meditate. just to kind of grasp a little bit of groundedness, But all of that has profoundly changed the way we engage in relationships, let alone the meaning of marriage, the role of sex in relationships, the definition of intimacy, the definition of monogamy, and the meaning of infidelity, and the place of the child in the family. 5 of these have been totally transformed.
I'm legit exhausted. Like, I need a whiskey at this point.
Get her a whiskey.
No, I mean, I've had a whiskey, let's be honest.
But do you see?
Yeah, I see, but I also feel like I think that there is a mixed audience here of people, but a lot of people here are in leadership. It's becoming impossible because you're navigating your inner life and having discernment around how to make the right decision, the good decision, when the sands of culture are shifting all the time, and we're actually not sure what's real and what's not real, what's been driven by external forces, and like where morality, ethics, all these things, certainty, uncertainty, how to hold it. You have to be a tightrope walker and a circus performer to get it right. And so there's an exhaustion.
Polarization for me comes directly from that. The more uncertain we are about how things need to be, the more we perform pseudo-certainty, which appears in the form of polarization.
So how to help?
Do you understand? It's
Yes.
like suddenly people pretend like they know and they have the answer and they have the truth and they're standing on... But usually that happens, in fact, when people are very uncertain. This you could see a lot in the pandemic, in the beginning of the pandemic in particular,
So what's coming into your therapeutic space the most?
Right now?
Right now.
Pandemics are relationship accelerators. Basically, they put you in touch with mortality or with life is short. And they either make you say, what am I waiting for? Let's move in, let's have a pandemic baby, etc., etc. Or what am I waiting for? I'm out of here, I've had it. It's been long enough, life is short. So we have seen the babies, and now we are seeing the wave of divorces and breakups and fundamental shifts in structure from monogamy to polyamory to consent, basically redefining the systems. So that's one thing. We're seeing people coming in that have basically endured the flatness of what needed to be done in confinement. When you are in confinement, and you were, 100 days in confinement
380
straight,
days.
but you had the longest one stretch was 100 days, right? I mean, New
10
York,
days.
we had our version, but you were really,
We're special.
I think you don't even, honestly, I think you're not even realizing yet what you're coming out of. You're sitting here in a group next to each other. For so long, you couldn't do this. And not only didn't you do that, but when you walked the street, you looked down, you looked away, because every person could have been a potential contaminant. And to suddenly change completely, instead of doing this, it was like that. I mean, what this whole, it's so granular, how much we had to learn to distance, to choke. And I think a lockdown is kind of the numbing of the erotic inside of us. I often think, those of you who know my work, that we straddle 2 fundamental sets of human needs, right? We straddle our need for security and safety, and we straddle our need for freedom and adventure. And in our relationship, the essence today is to reconcile these 2 fundamental needs. But a lockdown basically says everything has to be geared towards safety, security, predictability, dependability, stability, and everything else that is spontaneous, serendipitous, happenstance, curiosity, exploratory, discovery, basically the stuff that makes you feel alive, not the stuff that helps you survive, has to be closed off. And when you have that in a relationship for a long time, you go berserk. So people now, they want to do vacations from the relationship, they want to take a trip away from the partner, they just need air, because fire needs air, and this has been choked. So that's another major thing that is coming in, is How do you create the air and find some way to preserve the relationship? Is the relationship able to hold itself while people go and kind of replenish themselves alone? Because the last person they want to do something with is the one that they've been locked up with, seriously. You know, how do you reconnect sexually? How do you bring back desire? That's the next thing, you know. Even if you felt thankful that you had this person and that you went through all of this, you know, not everybody had a sex party. You know, neither on Zoom nor anywhere else, nor even, you know, in in play parties that were just as rampant. But some people had the play parties.
What?
And
Say more. What?
Huh?
Of what do you speak?
Of what do I speak?
What is this play
Anybody
party?
would like to?
Oh my goodness! I need to do more research. So I know everybody here is like.
Does that relate to what you see here?
Yes.
What I just.
Well, yes. I think that well, not the sex parties, but the burnout. The burnout. Like I think, yeah, yeah.
I'm sad I didn't know about them.
Yeah. But at some point after parenting and all the things in life, and it's just asleep that one is after. But anyway, I think, so I'm sure everybody here, like me, would love to be working with you consistently on all these questions. But my real curiosity is you are so full of aliveness. It's astonishing and inspiring and wonderful to be around. And I'm going to drop a name because it's relevant, but I once had the privilege of interviewing Gloria Steinem, and she had the same energy as you, which is I expected to meet someone serious. I was very prepared. I had all my questions and I was stressed, and she felt younger than me, and she was 85 at the time. And it was shocking, that aliveness. And you're a therapist, like many therapists in the audience here, felt not so alive from the work. But previously you told me, I love my work. I love what I do. Can you talk to that a bit? Because I want to know the playbook for continuing to tap into aliveness even when the world's gone mad. And you're at the centre of people asking these questions about disconnection and freedom and where to find joy. How do you calibrate yourself when this is the work that you do every day?
That's 3 different questions.
Yes.
All right. So one is, how have I done different changes in my career? The other one is, how did I keep the work interesting in the last 3 years? And the other one is, what do I do to replenish myself? Yeah?
Can you start with the last one first?
Okay.
Yeah.
When I say, and it is a bit of the motto of my work, that the quality of our relationships is what determines the quality of our lives, I live by that. I am here and I'm meeting a friend that I met 32 years ago for 1 day only in Poland as I was going in 1990 to visit my parents' birth country and death country. And we basically, this is a very good example to your question. We spent the day, you know, walking on the ruins of everything that had been destroyed in our families. And then we went at night to some underground vodka club. And we just experienced Eros after experiencing Thanatos. And we drank ourselves through the night and talked forever and have been friends ever since. That is one of the ways I replenish. And I have a lot of fun. I do a lot of things. So in the pandemic, I replenished by having a film club with friends on 4 continents, having a book club, having a swimming group, having a yoga group of friends that I put together that met 4 times a week till today and has never missed a class. Wow. And it was all my friends in various parts of the world, and people could come in and out of it as we, you know, and everybody emerged as a yoga teacher, me included. But it was an amazing thing. You know, 4 times a week, 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock on the weekend. You opened the Zoom and you saw my friends in Paris, in Brussels, in Tel Aviv, you know. And So it's very much, I organize things I'm interested in through people, and they feed me. That feeds me a lot. I read, I go to movies, I love the theater. I mean, I basically really don't work all the time. But the things I do in work are also often very pleasurable. I'm very curious, and to come to a thing like this is actually like, okay, what's the anthropological field trip tonight? You know, who am I going to meet? What do these people have to say? How do they think? You know, what's relevant? You know, it's a very strange thing after all. Some of you have listened to Where Should We Begin? And it's like, you know me, I don't know you. You've been listening, you trust me a little bit, you think but I have no idea. So it's this very interesting thing of first date where you've already done a lot more research on me than I have on you. So that's how I replenish. I have a family. I was here with 2 of my kids. One of them left. I have 1 son still. My husband was prevented from traveling the day before we came, but it would have been an amazing combo of family trip after the pandemic and my work. I mix and match, basically. I mix and match a lot. That's what keeps me going. What I did in work-wise, I think the biggest shift career-wise is simply to move from working primarily in the clinical field, which I still am. I practice 2 days a week. But I was primarily in the clinical field. I was teaching, supervising. I was at NYU and all of that, to saying that I want to take relational health and turn it into a global public health campaign. I always thought that what happens in my office should be known outside, and I didn't know how to lower the 4 walls and how to open the door. And I wrote books and I did talking, but the podcast allowed me really, because it's never patience. We have 6,000 applicants for next season.
Wow.
For 10 episodes from all over the globe. You know, that allows me to tell stories, and I want these stories to be bridges so that other people don't feel as alone as they listen. And that's, I don't know if I'd even think of it anymore as just clinical. It's art. It's taken on a whole other, so to be creative is probably one of the most ways you can be alive, is to be creative. And that means doing things that I know nothing about. Like, I had never listened to a podcast when I created Where Should We Begin? I've never worked in corporate, but I did a podcast on how it's work. And then I created a game during the pandemic, a game of stories, Where Should We Begin? And I have never owned a card game. And I think that there's something really... And by the way, I wrote Mating in Captivity, and I never took a single course on sexuality. That came after. So there is something about talking about stuff I know nothing about, or doing things that I know nothing about. And but then I go in there. But you don't compare, because you have no reference. And there's something very scary and very freeing about not knowing where you've just plunged.
But you have a foundation of knowledge and inquiry that is incredibly solid, because it feels, even with you now, that you're always in a playful curiosity.
Yeah.
You're always in a spot where you're waiting for what's going to arrive in the moment.
That's
to
called
reveal.
aliveness. That is the definition of eroticism. And that is what often people come to ask. You can call it, I'm working, I don't work so... Oh yeah, it's a whole other conversation.
We are here for it.
I mean, I think that so much of the work is on trauma, because I come from trauma. It's about dealing with the trauma and not about dealing with the erotic recovery. It's one thing to take the cast off the arm, but if you don't use this arm and don't teach it how to move again and feel free and express itself and touch and be touched and experience connection, then what have you really done? And I know that there's quite a few other survivors and children of survivors of the Holocaust and of any other genocide, for that matter, in this crowd. The people who made it understood that somehow naturally. They sang in the camps. They sang in the cotton fields. They write poetry of refugees. they stay connected to longing, yearning, art, hope, possibility. That's why they're around. The others smoked a cigarette, which my father always said, the day you saw somebody smoke a cigarette, you knew that they had traded bread for a little stick, and that meant they were on their way out. And I think that when you say eroticism, it's so fluff like that. People instantly want to think about sex. The mystical of the sense of the word is aliveness. What do you do in the face of adversity? Numbness, flatness, hopelessness, lockdown, all of that.
What a magnificent salve for the place the world is in now. And I've thought about our last conversation for the decade since, I think it's been.
Wow.
When you talked about that there were those who came out of the camps alive and there were those who came out not dead. And
you want me to explain that?
Yeah.
So I'm writing Mating in Captivity, and my husband is a trauma expert or trauma psychologist, but he deals with large-scale psychosocial trauma, big things. Pandemics, shootings, capsized ferry boats in Korea, burning factories in Bangladesh, things like that. And he was working with victims of torture and political violence. And I asked him one day, how do you know when people come out of it? Like, what does it look like, somebody who comes back from having been in solitary confinement? We were working with Chilean refugees at the time as well. And we both kind of landed on when people are once again able to create or able to play, or which involves able to be curious, because all those things are outward. You can only do them if you feel safe enough that nothing bad is going to happen here because you've looked away for a second. You're not on guard. You have to be able to experience a minimum of carefreeness or unself-consciousness to experience pleasure. That was what he said. And then I said, and this is in the middle of writing a book, which at that point still I thought was a book about desire and sexuality. And I said, this is so interesting. Well, so I come from Antwerp, which is in the Jewish community is all Holocaust survivors, Melbourne being the largest community of Holocaust survivors in the world. And I remember saying, wow, Antwerp, I remembered there were two groups of people. Yeah. Among my friends, there were those who you went to their house and the curtains were down and there was plastic on the couches and there was a kind of a low hum. But the main thing was that you couldn't speak loud and you couldn't laugh loud and you couldn't cry loud and you certainly couldn't experience pleasure because you lived tethered to the ground, fearful and not trusting, because the world is a dangerous place. And I thought those are people who survived, but they never came back to life. And then there were the others, and they were my parents as well. I was really lucky in that sense. And these people, they also had all the same experiences, but something in them made them experience the erotic as an antidote to death. And so they knew how to keep themselves alive in the face of. It's not like they thought the world was a better place than the others, but they just went ahead with it anyway. They figured we didn't survive for nothing. And they were counterphobic, so to speak, meaning they took risks as if nothing can happen, all the way while knowing that stuff can happen at any moment, living with that kind of contradiction. And that is where my whole theory of eroticism then began to emerge.
So extraordinary. My sister's somewhere in the audience here, and our dad was born in a refugee camp straight after the Holocaust. And sometimes we've asked each other, like, what were they doing, having a baby in a displaced persons
it's very
camp?
clear what they were doing.
Yeah.
It's so clear that when people came out of the camps or out of the woods or out of the sewage canals or wherever they had survived, the most important thing, the first important thing they wanted to do is know that they were still human. And for that, having a child said, I'm still human, and out of me comes a baby and not a monster, because I have been so demonized, vilified, and degraded. That is such a powerful symbol of survival. It's never been said to them how fantastic this was. These were miracle. You know, they were miracle children. After that, it comes with a big burden, but...
It's amazing. No one's noticed that there's a magical person on the balcony up there, and that's Van. And Van is also the daughter of refugees, and we work very close together. And Van has the dreaded Rona, so she worked for months to make this happen, and she is now Juliet on the balcony, not allowed to attend. So round of applause for Van. We love you, Van. It's my job to embarrass you. But what's amazing about Van, I notice with Van and with me, is we get so much joy when other people experiencing joy. And Van's sort of the thing that gives you life, like me too, is just these moments when we're all together and we can bring people together to remember what it is to be human together. So it's very, very special. And your work is a balm for all of our souls. And I know that everybody here is enormously grateful for what you do and the way that you help us deepen and ask better questions of ourselves and each other. It's really magical work. And I wanted to, on the issue of eroticism and play a game with you. Do we play or do we ask questions first from the audience? I'm sure everyone's wanting to ask. Questions? Chomping at the bit. Okay.
Can I?
Yes.
You know, I'm going to connect this, and then we can, because the thing about this erotic thing is this. A very central moment for me in the pandemic was a video that I received from a friend of mine and of her children playing. And the kids were playing, basically they had taken the books and turned them into rocks, and they were hopping on the rocks in the river. And they took the pillows and they turned them into castles. And they had sheets around them and they were in character. And I just thought, freedom in confinement comes through our imagination.
Amen.
Right? This is the central agent of the erotic, is our imagination. It's the ability to transcend the limits of reality through play, through fantasy, and all of that. If we don't have that, and that's when I began to think, I'm going to create a game. And I'm going to create a game of stories that's going to be the best questions I've ever heard, because the questions are what makes the conversations interesting, and people have often feel like the conversations are so boring and dull and, you know, uninspired. And that was the whole thing about this, Where Shall We Begin? Which, by the way, has arrived on Australian soil.
Oh, yay!
But is caught up in some... red tape, but you can put yourself on the waiting list because we've sold out 3 times in a row, and so it's one opportunity for you to get it. But they are here and they will be released very soon.
So, I'm a little bit speechless, but we'll keep going. Question time. The young lady in the front.
Esther, thank you so much for coming. And I'm on the wait list and I can't wait.
Wait, you're going to get a mic.
Every Christmas I choose a gift to give everyone. So your card game is a gift. So thank you so much for making that easy. My question is about the concept of choice. So you spoke about the imagination and the difference between those who live and those who do not die. And I've always been curious. My parents have both passed on, but they made a choice to live and imagine in the face of trauma. What do you think it is that allows someone to have the courage to choose to imagine a bright or a possibility where there's no evidence?
I suggest that we collect a bunch, and we can kind of answer them.
Okay,
So
another question.
Your pen 1 sec?
Yeah. Do you want my notepad?
Yeah, a little piece of...
I can just lean in. I'm so sorry. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you got it. My question is about intergenerational directions in relationships, and have read your commentary around my parents' generation and how they had really clear roles, that, you know, the marriage was one relationship and there were others, and currently there's been a collapse so that we expect our partner to be everything, and read some of your commentary around technology and ambiguous loss. And I was wondering where you think, my job is working with young people, like teens, and so I was wondering...
Where are we going?
Yeah, where do you think, like, if that's the trajectory... I also hear from the teens I work with, like, an explosion of open-mindedness again as well, and I'm learning, like, I'm in a queer relationship, I'm learning to be non-binary which is how I identify, but through working with young people, and I was wondering, like, we've got a lot to learn as well that's coming out of that openness explosion. This is clumsy. Where do you think we're going?
Yep.
Next
Not
question.
me specifically.
You okay? You all right? Small injury.
Go ahead.
This is my question. I work with men most of the day, and the gender landscape, I feel, has changed quite a lot from my perspective, and especially the role of a man in a relationship / in the world. I guess my question's a little bit selfish. What's your one tip for men in relationships in the modern world?
Beautiful question. You can come up to Australians are polite. Be not polite and come up and ask questions. Great.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you both. It was really wonderful to hear you talk. I have a question about, you know, all these beautiful qualities that you talk about, Esther. How do we cultivate them? I really resonate with what Barry said quite a few times. Like, we come out of this invisible trauma that's largely unspoken about. I mean, I grew up pretty much in a war zone, I think I could say, in a mixed family in a war zone. But what I feel helped us stay somehow in Serbia, at the border with Croatia, in Serbo-Croatian family. And what I feel helped us stay the same was a sense of community and people coming together. And when it was really dark in former Yugoslavia, we would come and have parties every night in someone's house, and people would bake cakes, and we would play card games, and just sense of holding. And I feel we came out of that huge trauma a little bit less exhausted, and I feel like we're coming out of COVID pandemic in a way here in Melbourne. And I work with lots of people, and I'm trying to find tools how to cultivate now that sense of aliveness, joy, eroticism, for people who might not be able to tap into it so easily.
Great.
Beautiful.
Yep. All right, one more and then...
I think my question probably builds on that last one, but my partner and I have been working very hard on our relationship over many years, with no small thanks to you, so thank you for that. How do we role model that for the friends and family around us when you can see things breaking down and your heart bleeds for them? It's not our job to fix, but short of taking your card game on camping trips and making them talk about it around the fire, what else can we do?
It's not a bad idea.
We've done it before with other card games, so this one will be coming too.
Each one of these cards, because I had a sneaky peek before, made me go, ooh.
I think that one of the most mysterious questions is, why do the same circumstances become the source of strength for one person and the source of brokenness for the other? I mean, it's just very, very hard to know. And you can only know it after the fact. You ask the person who got propelled by it, what was it? And they give you a list of different things, you know, and it usually has to do with somebody like me at the right time in the right place, who believed in me or who saved me or who helped me, things like that. But fundamentally, I think there's a real mystery about that you can do any trauma research you want. That has not really yielded an answer yet. why one person chooses, to fight and why another person gives up. I think there's a lot of different things. Where you come from, what you were before, who's around you at that time. And sometimes it's just a matter of a moment in a day where you could have gone this way. You were just about to give up completely and just lie down and not move again. And you heard a bird. I mean, it's not, it's much more, as they say in aléatoire in French. It's much more small little things, not measurable like that. But in general, the presence of a person at a particular moment who helped you when you were crushing or crashing and made it so that you didn't hit the ground is a part of a lot of the stories. Where are we going is a very interesting thing. I mean, I don't think we know yet, This part of the conversation with Yuval was about transhumanism and the whole progression of what is the human being going to become. So that's, there's a trend in many directions. On the one hand, there is an openness to new definitions, to not define anything, because of not being locked up in a definition. And on the other hand, there is also the vagueness and the nebulousness of what it's like to live in something that never gets defined. And now a relationship is called a situationship, So it goes in both directions. There is something very beautiful when you don't lock things up in definitions, and then there is something very flimsy because we do need frames. We need references to relate to, even it's to bounce off of or to contradict. But if there is no reference, you get chaos. At the same time as you have a younger generation that is all opening up and fluid, it is also a generation obsessed with perfection. And perfection leads to cancel culture, and the cancel culture gets internalized, and then you can struggle with your own imperfection.
Can we just talk about that for the next hour? And I think the difference between Serbia or war, I just did a whole episode with a couple in Ukraine, part of a whole mental health campaign on mental health services in Ukraine, because this thing that you described about the parties, and we know that the most important things that will prevent trauma in the long run is connection, gatherings, cooking together, singing together, not therapy. And certainly not one-on-one therapy. Collective trauma demands collective resilience, not individual resilience. And collective resilience is not about a matter of a few traits that you have in you that are hardiness and grit. It's about tapping into the resources of the community, past and present. Former Yugoslavia knew it, Ukraine, people who work in large-scale efforts like that, this is what they are applying. And when you do focus groups in Ukraine all over the place, this is what they come back with. Fundamentally, it's what they need. What do they need? Rooms to meet that are heated with water that is running. And the rest they will do. I think that the pandemic, what was key to it is the degree of isolation. The touch hunger. It's one thing to live without sex. It's another thing to live without touch. I mean, people went for these pets all over the world because they needed something to touch. Because if you don't touch or are not touched, you become aggressive or irritable or depressed. You go, So the degree of isolation is only people are only becoming aware of it sometimes. I went for days and I just didn't talk to anybody, or I went out you had an hour a day that you could go outside, and for some people it became an opportunity to read and write and be creative, but for a lot of people, all of that was fine in the beginning, and then after a while, just the sheer exhaustion of another Zoom tea, So
That's the invisibility of it. And it's the opposite of what happens in war. It's a very different kind of thing. And on top of it, you were at home. So half the time, if you had a roof, you were supposed to not complain about the fact that things are not so bad. So you got involved in this whole thing like this, you know. And then there is a few very basic things about the trauma of the pandemic. One is prolonged uncertainty. It's the fact that it's not over. Even though we're sitting here, we don't know where it's going. We have no idea what this climate change is taking us, etc. The second thing is an enormous prolonged state of what is called enforced presentism. You know, we plan, we think in the future, we project ourselves. Enforced presentism is kind of a gravity in the moment on an ongoing basis. You know, the tendency, we move, but when it's all the time like this, all the time like this. And the next thing is the complete collapse of roles. You know, we are spatial people. We plan, we change clothes when we go to play tennis, when we go to swim, when we go to a party, when we go to work. There is a ritual, there is a preparation, there is a set of accoutrements, there is a calling of other people. It's a lot of things that go into entering into a role or an activity. Pandemic, I was a mother, a therapist, a supervisor, a wife, a friend, and many other things, all on one chair with the same sweatpants for 10 hours a day. By the end, you don't know anymore what is the daytime, what is the nighttime, when is work, when is off work. The same table was used for every activity. That blurring over time, you go berserk. And you had it long. This collapse of roles and complete annihilation of the spatiality, the spatiality of our lives was very debilitating. So that's just a few of the unique things that accompanied this experience, which for some people was traumatic and for others just hard.
She was asking for some tips on what to do with people that she's working with now.
You bring them together to tell stories. You bring them together to eat together. You bring them together to dance if they want, to play music. You bring them together to not... Sometimes it involves talking about what happened here and there. But it's actually... the essence is to bring them together. That's it. The rest will happen. And then men and modeling. So one thing, I think the most... What you asked, what about men? Now, the one piece of advice. No, I don't have one piece of advice. I have a take that is this. I think that in the conversation about men, we're missing... I don't know if we're missing, but there's a few things I would like to highlight, and that is this. The lives of women will not change until the life of men changes. And that means that women have had 50 years to redefine their identity as women, and men are only having the beginning of this opportunity now. A lot of our focus is on the power of men. And this notion that masculinity and patriarchy, you know, is a system that oppresses women. It oppresses everybody. Under patriarchy, men can either be powerful or connected, but never both things at the same time. And under patriarchy, masculinity is presented as if it is the given identity, when in fact it is constantly spoken to in the imperative. Prove you are a man. Show me you are a man. You know, what kind of a man are you? And in the end, if it was such a given, it wouldn't have to prove itself all the time. So if it has to prove itself all the time, it's because it's actually a very fragile identity. It's an identity that is very hard to acquire and very easy to lose. You don't hear, be a woman, show me that you're a woman, prove me you are a woman, because you just happened, you are, and you've got biology to sustain that. And so the focus on men and the conversations in men, I have spent a lot of time in men's groups. Actually, I'm often the only woman with 60 guys, and for 3 days on end, and it's been an incredible experience for me for years now, is that the real conversation should be about the powerlessness that men experience. and not the power that men experience.
Bravo.
That's a different conversation.
That's incredible because that really talks to, that's quite a burden on men to unshackle themselves when the lens at the moment is very accusatory and very angry, and many of us are raising young men whom we love and are partnered with men whom we love. So know that you are loved and are welcome to do that work, because I think when Brene Brown talks about show me a man who can be vulnerable, I'll show you a woman who's done her work. And I'd love to say that that's writ large for culture. There's a lot of blaming and there's a lot of shaming and there's a lot of inversion of the power pyramid, in my opinion, without actually all of us embracing one another and empowering each other.
Thank you. Thank you. Really, it's very important what you say. You know, the word loser and the word emasculated don't exist in the feminine. So that's
that for
I mean,
fucked up?
huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, how do you role model? Listen, one of the things I try to do with the podcast, but I think is what needs to be done in real life, is to actually not participate in a massive campaign of fake news. Everything's great. And then your best friend breaks up and you never saw it coming. You know, couples rarely talk to couples. Women sometimes talk to other women and men talk to nobody, you know, particularly in the hetero context. And I think that just for you to sit and just say, it looks like things have been really tough. Or it looks like, you know, your kids have been struggling. Or it looks like, and just that as friends is enormous. Or you're divorcing, come and stay with us for a few weeks. You know, just live with us. Much of what people come to therapy for should not be dealt in therapy alone. It should be dealt in community.
Feels like the answer to so much of the world's ills, a community, because we haven't even really talked about loneliness.
Yeah, a chosen community, because let's not glamorize the word community. Many people live in them and just can't wait to get out of it. You know, it has to be the one that is meaningful and lets you breathe. But yes, and the same for your kids. You tell your kids, you know, we're going through a rough time.
No, but they don't get to choose.
No.
I'm a Jewish mother.
No, but these people want to model for their children.
Oh, healthy modelling. Okay.
You know, I think I am of the persuasion that kids should see the struggles between parents if they also see the parents' ability to repair and make up. Or hear the parents say, I can't believe what you're doing and I can't wait to get the hell out of here. And then 10 minutes later, see you give a kiss. You know, rather than this pristine neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to play?
Danny and I never fight. Have we answered all the questions?
I think I did. Yes. Was there anything else burning?
Yes,
as
we could stay till midnight. I can see their faces. But I really want to play. So I thought that I was meant to choose a card from the game. Do you want to tell us how the game works? Because that's not how it's meant to work.
The game works in any way you want. You can play in a group of 2. You can be on a first date. You can be with your partner. You can be with your 8-year-olds off forward. You can be with your team. You can put 2 cards underneath a plate and just as the evening starts, just say, you know, what's underneath your plate. You can choose your own card or you can have other people say, I would like you to answer this one. Or you can play the whole game itself, with all the instructions, where basically you get a set of cards, everybody chooses a story for you. And then there are tokens so that the group can pile up. I want you to talk about this versus that. And it creates a whole dynamic energy. The main piece is this. People tell stories. This game is in order to unlock the storyteller within and also make you curious about the stories that the people you think you know are going to tell you that they've never told you and never even imagined telling anybody sometimes. It's light, it's serious at the same time. And it's quite amazing the stories people come up with. So the rest was really the fun of coming up with the most what I consider fun questions, basically. I had 1,000, I narrowed them down to 200.
So we're all going to play the game. I'm just going to do one round.
Yeah, we're going to go out there in the ballroom. We're going to play. I'm going to tell you how it works. You're going to copy the QR codes.
Esther is going to walk around and like help us all play. So it's all set up in the ballroom, and inside you're welcome to stay out here, listen to Monique de Martina's incredible music. Is Mon still here, or did Mon go? I don't know. That's a possible thing that may or may not be occurring.
Yeah,
and
looks like it passed.
Yeah, I told you it would. She's here. Monique, our magical musician, is here, and she'll be playing. So you can be out here, you can play the game, you can do whatever you like. There are no rules. All right. These are the cards. You pick one.
A scent that makes me nostalgic. Okay. One of the most visceral scents I live with is the scent of the Belgian waffle when you walk on the streets in Antwerp or in Brussels for that matter. It's that vanillin, and it's made to literally capture you from one block away. And the scent of the Belgian waffle is very, very powerful. It's like my Madeleine of Proust. That's the most immediate. And anyone who knows that scent and grew up or has gotten familiar with it, it's very hard to pass by and not want to then bite in that waffle.
There are so many good ones here. Can I ask you another one?
Yeah. Are you going to choose for me this time? Okay, go.
I don't want it to be about me.
I'll get to you, don't worry.
A story I tell myself, a story I tell about myself that isn't entirely true. That's super hard.
A story I tell about myself that isn't entirely true.
There's 15 you're choosing from.
There are many stories. No, I will put it to you this way. Whenever I tell a story, my fact finder or my fact-checking husband is right there to correct. And I have a knack for changing numbers. Like if I went to a place for 10 days, I say I was there for a month. You know, I always grow the number to represent something that is bigger than what it was because the impact of the thing was so big. Anyway, I can't tell you a story
Esther, that's Danny there. Can you just kind of just break that down? Why you say it's a month, not 10 days? Why do you say it's a month, not because it felt like a month? Because the feeling was more than it was.
And then I say to my husband, but who cares? It's for the effect.
Bravo.
It's the intent of the story. It doesn't matter. I went to Melbourne. I won't have been 5 days in Melbourne. I spent 2 weeks in Melbourne. And it was wonderful because the days were so packed that they felt like 2 weeks. And I don't like to have a fact checker right next to me who constantly corrects and tells me that I exaggerate. But it is a whole show that we now have. And when I talk by now, I look at him to see if he's going to correct me.
We just had our own therapy session. And I won. That was so fun. I love it. That's so true. So should we play? Does everyone want to play? Yeah.
Yes.
Esther's not going to let me off.
No, but I'm going to...
Okay. It's raining so hard.
A risk I took that changed my life.
Many. Leaving my career in film to stay in Melbourne and start doing the inner work. That's the first one I can think of. I wanted to just succeed, and I wanted to succeed at storytelling. But I realised that I wasn't going to be able to do the work I wanted to do unless I did the inner work first, because everything I was doing scared me too much. And so I stayed here, and I thought it was the end and the death of something, but it was the beginning of everything. So, yeah, I left the career I fantasised about to find the one I never expected.
I'm just going to give you a few like this. A part of myself I need to break up with is a rule I secretly love to break. The stupidest thing I learned about sex was the worst date I've ever been on, a text message I fantasize receiving. If I could whisper something in the ear of my younger self, the experience of power makes me a phone number I need to delete. The last lie I told was, and then there's about 70 of them having to do with sex. I leave them for you. That's the flavor of it. Voila. So with that, we can go play, we can go eat,
Thank
and
you,
I'm
Esther.
staying around.
Thank you, thank you. How lucky are we?